Reports have now emerged that Israel allegedly used United States-made white phosphorus munitions in an attack in southern Lebanon. The attack reportedly injured civilians and burned down houses. An investigation done by the Washington Post found that small fragments of the bombs were found in the Lebanese village of Deira. The report was also based on testimonies of the residents in the area. According to the locals, the shelling of the village in October lasted for hours and prevented them from leaving their homes until next day. Many said that they had breathing difficulties for several days following the attack. The White House had now expressed concern over reports of Israel's use of white phosphorus in attacks, adding it was seeking more details. The Israeli army has released a video showing weapons inside a mosque in Gaza's northern city of Jabalia. The video is presented by an unidentified member of the Israeli armed forces. The person narrates on some of the footage in which he exhibits areas within the mosque where the army said it found weapons and a Hamas training area. Now this comes as Israeli airstrikes poured down on Gaza's largest southern city, Khan Yunis, overnight. Deadly clashes and bombing shook central and northern urban areas. The Israeli police on Monday reported multiple impact sites of rocket fragments in Holon, the edge of Tel Aviv. They said one civilian was lightly wounded. A group of United Nations Security Council diplomats visited the Rafa crossing to inspect the delivery of humanitarian aid to the enclave. The diplomats landed in Arish Airport in the northern Sinai city of El Arish on Monday morning before heading to the crossing. The border crossing has been the sole link between Gaza and the outside world ever since the Israel-Hamas war began on October 7th. The visit came after the US vetoed a resolution at the Council that called for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Now, the UNSC diplomats visited the Arish hospital to inspect injured Palestinians who are receiving treatment there. They also visited the Egyptian Red Crescent stores before heading to the Rafah crossing. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has promised to reinforce Russia's military naval might as he attended the inauguration of 2 nuclear submarines. The Russian leader took part in a flag-hoisting ceremony in Severodvinsk on the White Sea. Now, Putin said that the submarines would strengthen the combat readiness of the Russian Navy. In addition to these 2 vessels, which will join the Pacific Fleet, Russia is building 8 nuclear submarines. Russian lawmakers in October backed a record increase in military spending, which will account for almost a third of all outlays in 2024. Now, this comes as Putin recently announced that he was running for re-election in 2024, almost 2 years after launching the ongoing offensive in Ukraine. Allies of the jailed Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny have said that they are unable to reach him. They say that the Kremlin critic has been removed from the Russian penal colony and his current whereabouts are unknown. In the latest, the Russian State Department has mentioned that the United States has also reached out to Russia over Navalny. Navalny aides have been preparing for his transfer to a special regime colony, which is known as Russia's harshest prison system. Navalny's spokeswoman confirmed that the prison facility informed his lawyers that the opposition leader was no longer present with inmates. His aide, Leonid Volkov, took to social media claiming that the timing was 0% coincidence and 100% direct manual political control from the Kremlin. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in the United States ahead of his last-ditch effort to convince US lawmakers to continue aid for Ukraine. Zelensky arrived in Washington late Monday to meet with top US lawmakers, the head of International Monetary Fund and the US President Joe Biden during his visit. As he started his critical visit to Washington to shore up security assistance, he met with International Monetary Fund's chief, Kristalina Georgieva. The fund's executive board approved a $900 million disbursement for Ukraine from its $15.6 billion loan program. The IMF chief met Zelensky for nearly an hour at the IMF headquarters in Washington. She also told him that the IMF's executive board was unanimous in its support for Ukraine. Former US President Donald Trump maintains his indomitable lead ahead of the Republican nomination contest for the 2024 presidential elections. Now, as per a new poll conducted by Reuters and Ipsos, he has the support of more than 50% of party voters. The first ballots of the presidential race will be cast in Iowa's Republican caucus next month. As per the new poll, 61% of self-identified Republicans would prefer Trump to take on Democratic President Joe Biden. None of his rivals are anywhere close. Entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy stood at 5%, while former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie got 2%. 8% of the voters said they were undecided. Less than 25% of Republican respondents believe the accusations against Trump about the election fraud and his role in instigating the January 6th Capitol rioters. Amid growing tensions, Britain has now condemned China's unsafe tactics against Philippines in the South China Sea. Since the South China Sea holds a strategic importance, it has been conflict-ridden year between China and the Philippines. Now, on the 10th of December, a Philippines boat and Chinese Coast Guard ship collided near a contested reef. The Chinese Coast Guard also used water cannons on 3 Philippine vessels, causing serious engine damage of a disputed shoal in the South China Sea. Now, a spokesperson at the Chinese embassy in London said Beijing firmly opposes and strongly condemns UK's groundless accusations. Ahead of a key vote later today, Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is facing a battle to persuade the Tory MPs to back his flagship Rwanda bill. The bill seeks to revive the government's plan to send some asylum seekers to the East African country. Now, many MPs have said it does not go far enough and will not work in its current form. The UK Supreme Court ruled last month that Rwanda was an unsafe place to send those arriving in small boats on England's southern coast. France's opposition MPs have rejected the government's highly controversial immigration bill without even chairing a debate on it. The far right, the left, and the moderates have unanimously voted against the bill. The French government says the bill aims both to control immigration and better integrate migrants. Among several measures, the bill would make it easier for the government to expel migrants who are sentenced to prison sentences of 5 years or longer, while it will make it more difficult for migrants to bring family members to France. The government can now decide to send it back to the upper house, or it can also use special executive powers to force its adoption without a vote. Meanwhile, Poland is set to pave way for the new European Union supporting government as the parliament has elected Donald Tusk as Prime Minister. Tusk's win comes 2 months after a national election that was swept by a coalition of parties. Former European Council leader will take power as incumbent Polish Premier Mateusz Morawiecki lost confidence vote. In the 460-seat lower house of the parliament, the vote on Monday was 248-201 in support of Tusk. Trump's three-way alliance bagged a comfortable majority vote in October and has promised to quote-unquote fix everything together. The parties have vowed to work in tandem under Tusk's leadership to restore the democratic standards and improve diplomatic ties with allies. Chinese President Xi Jinping is on a 2-day visit to Vietnam. President Xi's visit comes 3 months after US President Joe Biden's visit to Hanoi. The visit is crucial as the two countries contend for influence in the Southeast Asian nation. The Chinese leader will visit Hanoi to strengthen the relationship with Vietnam and its ruling Communist Party. He will be hosted at the presidential palace. Now, as per Vietnam's Foreign Office, the Chinese leader will meet with Communist Party General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong, President Vo Wang Chung, and Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh. Continuing China's classic developmental diplomacy, President Xi Jinping is expected to announce funding for railway lines that are vital for Vietnam to export goods. According to data released by the United Nations Refugee Agency, more than 1,200 Rohingya refugees have landed in Indonesia since November, where they face a wave of hostility and rejection. The regional communities say they are fed up of a spike in the numbers of boats carrying the persecuted ethnic minority to their shores. Arrivals tend to spike between November and April, when the seas are calmer. During this period, Rohingya refugees take boats to neighboring Thailand and Muslim-majority Indonesia and Malaysia. In a statement on Friday, Indonesian President Joko Widodo blamed the recent surge in arrivals on human trafficking. President Widodo has promised to work with international organizations to offer temporary shelter. Meanwhile, the Colombian Navy reported that hundreds of tons of illegal substances were seized as part of an international anti-narcotics operation. The 45-day operation, led by the International Orion Naval Campaign, involved 42 countries across 4 continents. The operation netted a record number of drug seizures. This includes 195 tons of cocaine, 175 tons of marijuana, and 14.5 tons of hash. The countries involved in the operation included the United States, Belgium, Spain, Indonesia, Senegal, Colombia, and Brazil. Protesters queued up in front of a meeting room and raised their hands in silence as negotiators arrived for a night meeting. The meeting came after the COP28's Emirati presidency disappointed several nations by proposing a draft deal that did not include a phase-out of fossil fuels. Now, the landmark 2015 Paris Agreement set the increasingly elusive target of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels. Meeting the target was necessary to avoid the worst ravages of climate change. The northeast Australian cities of Cairns and Port Douglas are bracing for the arrival of tropical cyclone Jasper. The cyclone is expected to make landfall in the next 24 hours and will bring destructive winds and potential flooding. The Category 1 storm has been slowly churning across the Coral Sea. The Weather Department has said that the cyclone will turn into a Category 2 storm, bringing winds of 140 kilometers per hour. Authorities have set up evacuation centers and deployed more emergency crews, as authorities urged people to stock up food and tie down loose outdoor equipment. Some supermarket shelves were stripped bare of essential items, including bottled water. According to the new Red List compiled by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, nearly a quarter of freshwater fish are at risk of extinction due to global heating, overfishing, and pollution. Nearly a fifth of all threatened freshwater species are affected by climate change, from impacts such as falling water levels, shifting seasons, and seawater moving up rivers. Freshwater fish make up more than half of the world's known fish species. The warnings that come with this new Red List report are aimed at jolting decision makers at COP28 into action. US automaker Tesla said it has a moral obligation to continue improving its autopilot driver assistance system and make it available to more consumers based on data that showed stronger safety metrics when it was engaged. The automaker responded to a Washington Post investigation of serious crashes involving autopilot on roads where the feature could not reliably operate. The company said its data showed it was saving lives and preventing injuries. The company also reiterated that the driver remained responsible for control of the vehicle at all times and is notified of this responsibility. In more business news, JP Chase is set to outsource the operations of its local custody business in Hong Kong and Taiwan. A Reuters report claims the Wall Street Bank, the world's third largest global custodian, is in the process of selecting another bank to take over the local custodian operations in Hong Kong and Taiwan. Now, JP Morgan has around $520 billion worth of client assets under custody in the two North Asian markets. Meanwhile, a Reuters report suggests that Boeing has embarked on deeper than expected cuts in its strategy ranks, halving the number of planners working within key divisions as it refocuses energies on tackling industrial pressures. The move is the latest evidence of renewed industrial priorities after Boeing named a new CEO. Remember, Boeing has been grappling with supply disruption at a time when it is saddled with almost $40 billion of debt. In some sports news now, Nigeria's striker Victor Osimhen was crowned the African Men's Player of the Year for helping Napoli win the Serie A title for the first time in 33 years. The 26-year-old beat Egypt's Mohamed Salah and Morocco's Ashraf Hakimi to the prestigious award. Osimhen scored 26 times in 32 appearances for Napoli last season, including the goal that sealed the Scudetto in May. Nigeria's Barcelona forward Asisat Oshoala was the Women's African Footballer of the Year for a record 6th time, while Morocco won the National Team of the Year in the men's category after their thrilling run to the World Cup semi-finals in Qatar.